Hey everybody, it's Brian Goulet of Goulet Pen Company and Ink Nouveau, and this is the Pilot Vanishing Point Fermo. It is the retractable, twist retractable fountain pen that is the cousin to the Click Vanishing Point that you may be familiar with. So I wanted to show you, I've been playing around with it the last week or so. It's got some cool things about it. I wanted to compare it to the other Vanishing Point since they are kind of similar. So here we go, let's check it out. The Pilot Vanishing Point Fermo, here it is. This is one of the three colors. Well, this is actually a box. The pen inside is one of the three colors that I will show you. If you have any Pilot pen or have seen any of the, well, not any Pilot pen, any pen like Vanishing Point or above, comes in these Pilot boxes. It's got a little engraved Pilot logo here in the top. It's got Pilots here in the top, kind of embossed, or I don't know the exact process there, but you know, it's in there. Gold, kind of neat. Standard Pilot box. Here's the pen. I'll just set that aside for just a second. It does have a removable, kind of a flimsy insert, but that's okay. These boxes are not my absolute favorite, but they are durable on the outside. I will say that. The inside here has a little insert that's got a warranty registration card, some instructions about how to use the pen, and information about Pilot and Namiki. And on the inside, it's got a cartridge, which this is the standard Pilot Namiki cartridge that will fit just about any of the Pilot pens that I'm aware of. The other thing that comes in here, you may not be familiar with this. This is the metal cartridge cap, and you need this for the Fermo or for the Vanishing Point because it requires pressure on the back of the cartridge in order to work properly. So they include this metal sleeve that kind of covers over top of it. That way you don't have to worry about damaging your cartridge or the pen malfunctioning at all because of the pressure put on the cartridge. It has this little cartridge cap that fits over there. So they include that in there, which is kind of nice if you want to use cartridges. Me personally, not my thing, but you know, that's cool. It has that option. But okay, anyway, that's enough of the case. That's not really why we're here today, is it? We want to see the pen. So here it is. There's three different colors, blue, black, and silver. They're pretty classy looking colors. It's got kind of a vintage look to it, just like the Click Vanishing Points do. Very classic. They only come in the rhodium trim. So no gold of any kind. And the pens as they come from Pilot have rhodium plated gold nibs on them, 18 karat gold nibs. I've talked about this in other videos, but the nibs that come on these pens, they are rhodium so that they're silver colored, but it's still the 18 karat gold nibs that are used on the other Vanishing Point pens. So the performance is going to be the same there. It's the rhodium refers to the plating, which really only affects the color. So that's just to clear that up there. But anyway, the pen is not all that different from the other Vanishing Point, which I have one right here. If you've never seen a Vanishing Point before, basically the pen is kind of unique in that it is a retractable fountain pen. You'll notice there's no removable cap of any kind on either of these. And these are kind of like, sibling pen models here. They're both actually called Vanishing Point. It's just the Click one is just called Vanishing Point. The twist retractable is called the Vanishing Point Fermo. And that's kind of what we're focusing on, but a lot of people are more familiar with the Vanishing Point, I think. So that's why I'm going to focus on a little bit of background here. The pens have a fixed clip that is on the gripping end of the pen, which is abnormal from most fountain pens, because most fountain pens, a typical one, like I've got a Pilot Metal Falcon here, which has, your typical removable screw cap, and then when you post it, your clip is actually on the back end of your hand, and it doesn't get in the way at all. But because these pens have retractable nibs, the clip ends up being on the gripping end. And that's probably the one thing that I hear the most that is a complaint of any kind about these pens, is that for some people, gripping this pen can be, the clip can get in the way a little bit. I personally don't find that it gets in the way. And if you notice on both of these pens, it has kind of an inset. So it kind of like curves in there a little bit where your finger would naturally lie, so that it does not get in the way. It's a little fatter up here, but Right here, it has kind of an inset so that it doesn't get in the way. I find that my fingers touch the clip, but it's not too bad. If I'm writing for a really long period of time, I kind of get sick of it a little bit, but I typically don't sit down for long writing sessions anyway. This is something more that I kind of whip out, jot a couple notes, put it back, and it works really well for that. So that's something there. The overall size difference between the two pens is not drastically significant. You can see here they're almost exactly the same length, but the Vanishing Point, not the click version, is actually a little bit shorter when you have the nib out, because that back part of the clip actually, or the clicker, kind of stays down. I don't know if that really matters a great deal to you. If you like longer pens, the Fermo is a little bit longer for you, but that's it's not drastically significant. The Fermo is a little bit thinner. It's about 1 millimeter thinner in diameter than the click Vanishing Point. And if you notice with the design of the pen, it's a less drastic kind of blimp maybe has a bad connotation. I love the Vanishing Point, don't get me wrong. But it has kind of a drastic curvature here between the very end of the pen and further up where you're grabbing. And that's not really that big of a deal for me, but you know, some people are not so into that. The Fermo is much more subtle. And it's something that you can certainly visually see, but when you're holding it, it definitely makes a difference too. So it's not, you know, it's one of those things. I'm just pointing it out. It's not really good or bad. It's just a subtle difference. The pen, the way that it works is the entire body here is fixed, and then the end part here, which is textured, I guess, ribbed, I think would be the way to say it. It is pretty easy to grip, and it has a twisting, so you twist it clockwise, and the nib will come out of the pen, and it stays there until you undo it. It is kind of spring-loaded back here in the back of the mechanism, so that if you start to do it and don't do it all the way, it'll retract the nib back in. You see that there? Whoop. So it kind of assists you when letting go or retracting the nib. And that's kind of nice, because the way that this mechanism works in here is actually very similar to the Vanishing Point, in that it has a little trap door that folds down. You see that going down right there, and then the nib kind of emerges out of it. And then when you put it back in there, it slides back, and the little spring-loaded trap door goes back up and seals the nib. One question I do get about these Vanishing Points is, how well does it seal the nib? Well, it's actually does a pretty darn good job. As far as retractable pens go, as retractable nibs go, it's one of the best. It's probably not as good as some of the fountain pens that are made to seal better, but I haven't noticed a drastic difference in the way that this nib stays wet or dries out versus most of the other conventional fountain pens that I have. So Pilot does a really good job in that respect. And the fact that, you know, this twist retractable kind of spring assists you when you kind of just let it go, and that door will go up to close it off, that is definitely a huge plus, a good detail that I see. The one thing I did want to point out, the first time that I put the nib unit in here and went to open it up, if you twist it, and it'll go to where it kind of has a natural resting point. It's got some spring tension, and then it kind of lets off right at the end, like right about there. Well, you gotta go just a little bit further to kind of click it in place, and you'll feel an actual click, and that's when it locks into place. If you don't go until it actually kind of clicks, then the nib will be out all the way, but it'll kind of quickly bring itself back in. At first I thought, oh my gosh, is this pen broken? No, I just didn't know how to use it. So you know, you have to go until it kind of stops you, go a little bit further, click, it's in place, and then it doesn't go back until you want it to. So the pen breaks apart right in the middle. You just twist it apart. It's got a nice rhodium ring right in there, so it's very easy visually to see where it goes. The twist mechanism is here in the back of the pen, and then in the front of the pen is basically a housing for the nib unit itself. And this is the exact same nib unit that is in the Vanishing Point. I'll show you. Very similar concept. Breaks apart in the middle. Voila. Same nib unit. So if you have a nib unit from a Vanishing Point, you can interchange it with the Fermo. You can interchange the Fermo with the Vanishing Point. It's exactly the same. That's probably helps that they named the pen the Vanishing Point Fermo, so at least it gives you some idea that, you know, they are sibling pens, but you know, it still could be a little confusing, so I did want to clear that up. But the pen itself is an 18-karat nib, rhodium-plated nib, available in extra fine, fine, medium, and broad. Now, for any retailer that swaps out the nibs or sells nibs separately, you can also get the yellow gold trim nib units in fine, medium, and broad. Pilot, as of right now, in the making of this video, does not make yellow gold in extra fine. It's only the rhodium ones. So there's a little piece of info there for you. The nib unit itself is obviously comes out of the pen, and that's how you fill it, is by pulling the whole thing out of the pen. Sometimes, you know, I get questions about people who try to fill the pen with it in here like this, and they have difficulty. Well, obviously, because it's not meant to be done that way. And so the nib unit itself, and I covered this in the other Vanishing Point video too, but it's worth noting here, the filler hole is right here. So when you fill the pen with ink, you've got to immerse this entire nib up until you hit this metal housing here, so that that filler hole is under the ink, in the ink, and then you can draw it up. It is a cartridge converter, so the converter does just pull right out. It's a little bit tough at first, but after the first time, it's easier to get it out. And then it does have this little metal doohickey in here, and this thing is meant to help to assist the ink in coming down to the bottom of the converter and not hanging up here. That's one thing that, before that little metal doohickey was in there, the Vanishing Points and the Namiki Falcons and things like that, that's one thing that they would have trouble with sometimes. But they've solved that issue now. Basically, as of March of 2012, this issue's been solved, and it's not really so much a problem anymore. So it just friction fits right in there, pretty smooth. If you have a cartridge, you know, it's very simple. I won't actually stick the cartridge in there just because I don't want to have to clean out the pen, but it's a very similar concept. The cartridge just fits right in here, and then you give it a good jam in there, and that will break the seal on the cartridge. And then, of course, you would slip your metal cartridge cap on top of it, and it would be the same size as the nib unit with the converter, so that it would operate properly in your pen. There you go. So, assuming we've got a pen here, I actually have one already inked up, but I can go ahead and show you how it's done here. I have a bottle of Kujaku, which is a Pilot Iroshizuku ink. Sorry, I forgot to grab it before I sat down and do the video. I like this ink. It's a nice ink. The Iroshizuku inks are expensive, but they are very nice, fast-drying inks. You know, good performance all around, very wet. Wet writing inks for smooth flow, all that kind of good stuff. So if you haven't heard about Iroshizuku inks, just do a quick Google search and you'll see lots of good stuff about those. But anyway, the way that the nib unit fills, and I'm going to fill from my silver one, because that's actually the one that I've been using as of late. I just thought the blue one would show up better in the video. But you take the nib unit out, and you can't really see what I'm doing with the piston converter here, but if you can imagine, when I'm unscrewing the piston, it is going down inside there, and then I immerse it into the pen, into the bottle of ink. It'd help if I could show you. And then you just twist it back up. It's not a bad idea to do it a couple of times, just because you want to try and get the converter as filled as possible. And then the key thing, of course, that I pointed out already is to make sure that it's immersed all the way up until it hits this metal housing. And then just grab a paper towel or something of the sort and just give it a quick wipe, and you're pretty much ready to go with the thing. Okay, so put that aside, put the cap on it. And then you reassemble the pen. The thing you want to make sure that you do when you're reassembling and disassembling this pen is that you're not coming at a weird angle or going really fast or anything, because you know this nib could in theory get scratched up, because if you look inside there, you know, there's a metal ridge in there, and if you come at this thing really crazily and just jam it in here, you could damage your nib. So you want to try and come at it as straight as possible and try not to touch the sides of the inside of the pen when you put it in. It is spring tension as well, so if you happen to push it down and then slip your hand, you could fling this thing out of the back of the pen. I have done it before, and usually it results in ink getting places you don't want it to go. So you screw the thing back together, it fits together nicely, doesn't click or anything like that. It just kind of friction fits until it won't go anymore. You don't have to twist really hard or anything like that. And then of course to retract or to get the pen nib to come out of the pen, you just give it a nice little twist in the back until it kind of stops, and there you have it. The nib that I have in here is a medium nib, but I've used the Pilot nibs before, the Vanishing Point nibs, and so there's nothing revolutionary that I have here versus the other nibs because they're actually the exact same. So like I mentioned before, the rhodium nibs are not any different than the gold nibs. But the one thing that I do want to point out, and I have another one, is the extra fine nib. So the one thing that I wanted to cover there is that whenever you're dealing with pens from different companies, there's indications of nib sizes like fine, medium, broad, etc. But it's kind of like women's dress sizes where it varies by manufacturer as to what the thing actually ends up being. So even though there are designations, it's usually just kind of a rough guideline. And generally speaking, Japanese pens like Pilot tend to be a little bit finer than Western pens like Lamy, Pelican, Parker, Waterman, etc. And so the thing you have to kind of watch out for is that you know what nib size you want. Now, Vanishing Point nibs are all over the place, so there are a lot of reviews and bloggers and things like that that you can use to get good advice. We have all of the nibs up in the nib nook at Goulet Pens. But what I find with the nibs, this is an extra fine that I have here. It's actually already inked up with Kujaku. That's what I was using for most of the week. But as an extra fine nib, this nib is awesome. I personally do not like extra fine nibs. So it was kind of like torture for me to have to use an extra fine. But for those of you that like extra fine nibs, it's pretty amazing. And I'll show you here real quick. So that's the medium Pilot Vanishing Point. And this is on Rhodia 80-gram dot pad paper. These dots are 5 millimeters apart. So that should give you a little idea of what it's like. And then I have here the extra fine nib, which is pretty darn extra fine, as you can see here as I write. If you like extra fine nibs, you will like this nib. It's one of the finest extra fine nibs that you can get from a manufacturer without having to go with a custom grind or anything like that. It's very similar to, like the Platinum Ultra Extra Fine. If you've ever used those, I think I have another video on that. But anyway, it's incredibly fine. I mean, you can see the difference. The Pilot Vanishing Point Medium I find the medium and the broad Pilot Vanishing Point nibs are closer to Western nibs, but the fine and the extra fine nibs are much finer. So there's kind of a gap there between the Pilot fine and medium Vanishing Point nibs, where there's a pretty big jump. So if you like your fine nibs, fine and extra fine are the way to go. If you like them, more accustomed to brands like Lamy and so on, I usually recommend the medium nib. But you can see here the difference and this is with the same ink. The same ink can look very different in one nib versus the other, even within the same brand, the same model, and on the same paper. But it's, if you like to write really fine, I mean, I was kind of writing normal, but you can write very, very fine. I mean, finer than the dot on the Rhodia pad, for sure. It's just incredibly fine. If you like to write really small, and this is 5mm ruling is really pretty narrow as far as paper goes. So if you like to write, as fine as can be, you have to write slow, and you have to write very light. But that's probably no more than 2 millimeters high that I'm writing right there. And that's pretty amazing in my opinion. Now, the fine and the extra fine are not going to write as super smooth as the medium and the broad do. Just because when you get so fine, I mean, you're basically writing with like a needle point, kind of. So you're going to have to write slow and with light pressure. But look at what you can accomplish when you want to write that small. That's pretty gall darn amazing. And the last thing I wanted to do, now that I've shown you how the thing writes, is compare it to a couple other pens. Okay, I've already compared it to the other, the Fermos, and I compared it to the other Vanishing Point, which I'll go ahead and reassemble that for you so you get an idea. But there's a couple other retractable pens that I wanted to show you. There aren't a whole lot of retractable pens in the fountain pen world. Doing a capped pen is a much more practical design, than it is to do retractable. But there's the Vanishing Point, and the other one that I wanted to point out was, probably comes to mind next would be the Lamy Dialog 3. Similar kind of concept. It is a twist retractable as well, except this one, the twist mechanism is built into the entire body. So this one, you twist it, the whole thing, and out comes your Lamy nib. And this comes with a Lamy 14 karat nib that is the same shape and design as the Lamy steel nibs that you're probably familiar with if you follow fountain pens at all. You may even have several of them yourself. And the way the Dialog 3 works is it's got this little trap door that flips down, and out comes your nib. So there you go. That's that. And then the other one that I have, which is probably one that you have never even seen before. This is the Stipula DaVinci. I don't really know why I have this pen, to be honest with you. I kind of just became infatuated with it and picked it up because, retractable pens are not all that common. The way this one works is kind of neat. It has a door that kind of turns, opens it up as the nib emerges out of the pen. Now this one, you got to do a good number of twists in order for it to come out. And it's a good sized nib, but the pen is pretty enormous, especially compared to the other ones. You can see the girth of this pen. Kind of neat. And then it's also, got another neat feature, like if you twist, if you hold the clip band and then twist on it, it will go up and down depending on the thickness of the shirt that you're wearing. So that's kind of interesting. But anyway, I just thought it'd be kind of neat to show these off and see how they compare. Price-wise, the Vanishing Point steals the show because you're going to pay about $140 street price for that. And really, it's a pretty great pen for what you get, and that is why this pen is really the standard when it comes to retractable fountain pens. The Fermo is up there with the Dialog 3 in terms of price. The Fermo is $260 as a street price, $325 list. So it's definitely a jump in price from the regular Vanishing Point. And for that reason, I imagine that a lot of people are probably going to say, well, it's not worth it. I'll just get the Click Vanishing Point. And I certainly get it. The nice thing about the Click Vanishing Point is that you can operate the thing with one hand and you can kind of click and go. Personally, I don't really find the one-hand thing to be that big of a deal because it's not often that I'm grabbing a pen with one hand and then clicking and going. Usually when I'm getting a pen, I'm getting it out of my pocket or out of my pen case or something like that. And the Fermo, it's an easy twist. It's definitely a single rotation twist. You don't have to grip and do that. It's kind of the same thing with the Dialog 3. It's just a single twist and you're ready to go. The Stipula is a little less practical in that sense, it's also the more expensive too, but go figure. So, as far as the price goes, it's really a convenience factor in terms of not having to worry about the cap. It's the slimmer design, the sleeker look, a little bit different look to it than the regular Vanishing Point. So that's kind of where the Fermo stands. The Dialog 3 is a little bit more. It's up near 300, 400, and the Stipula is like 700, 800, and it's gone through the roof. So that's the Fermo as well as other pens, but certainly as much information about the Fermo as I could put into one video. And I hope you enjoyed it. If there's anything I didn't cover in the video, you can always leave me a comment here. I'd love to hear what you think about it. Thanks so much for watching, and right on.